Oh, hi, Winter. You got first. And hi, how are you doing today? We are reading Frankenstein. Yes. I actually am trying something different with my tea today. We are doing, mango tea. I'm not exactly sure about it. I like mango stuff, but this I'm not really sure about. Because it's like warm mango stuff, so I'm like, ugh. Not 100% sure on that. But we are so close to finishing this book. And our next book we're going to be reading is going to be one of the novellas back there. We're going to, on TikTok, we're going to do a little, like, wheel spinny thing where I put all the books that are public domain on there, on a little spinny wheel, and makes it pick whichever one is next. Yes. Very exciting. How's everyone's day going? Okay, we should hop right into it. Okay. Let me just make sure it's volume 3. Yes, volume 3, chapter 2. Okay. Is this even cold enough to drink? I mean, warm enough? Oh. That's still way too hot to drink. Okay. And I forgot to post it on TikTok that I was live. That's fantastic. I just realized that. Okay, let's do that real quick. Wait, did I forget? Wait. Yes, I did. Okay. So that's one of the purposes of the starting soon screen, so I do things like that. Okay, volume 3, chapter 2. When was our present point of rest? We determined to remain several months in this wonderful and celebrated city. Serval desired the intercourse of the men of genius and talent to flourish at the time, but this was with me a secondary object. I was particularly occupied with the means of obtaining the information necessary for the completion of my promise. My voice is being weird again. And quickly availed myself to the letters of introduction that I had brought with me, addressed to the most distinguished natural philosophers. If this journey was taking place during my days of study and happiness, it would have afforded me inexpensible pleasure, but a blight had come over my existence, and only visited these people for the sake of information they might give me the subject in which my interest was so terribly profound. Company was irksome to me. When alone, I could fill my mind with the sights of heaven and earth. The voice of Henry soothed me, but I could thus cheat myself into transitionary peace. But busy, uninteresting, joyous faces brought back despair with my heart. I saw an enormous barrier placed between me and my fellow man. This barrier was sealed with the blood of William and Justine, and to reflect on the events connected with those names filled my soul with anguish. But in Serval I saw the image of my former self. He was inquisitive and anxious to gain experience and instruction. The difference of manners which he observed to me was an inexhaustible source of instruction and amusement. He was forever busy, and the only check on his enjoyments was my sorrowful and dejected mind. I tried to conceal this as much as possible, that I might not debar him with the pleasures natural to one who is entering on the new scene of life. Undisturbed by any care or bitter recollection, I often refused to accompany him, alleging another engagement, and I might remain alone. I am now also begin to collect the materials necessary for my new creation, and this was to me like the torture of single drops of water continually falling on my head. Every thought was that devoted to it was an extreme anguish, and every word that was spoken in allusion to it caused my lips to quiver, and my heart to palpite. After passing some months in London, we received a letter from a person in Scotland, who had formerly been our visitor at Geneva. He mentioned the beauties of his native country, and asked us if those were not sufficient allurements to induce us to prolong our journey to far north as Perth. When he resided, Serval eagerly desired to accept this invitation, and I, although I abhorred society, wished to view again mountains and streams, and all the wondrous works in which nature adorned her chosen dwelling places. We had arrived in England at the beginning of October, and it was now February. We accordingly determined to commence our journey towards the north at the expiration of another month. In this expedition, we did not intend to follow the great road of Edinburgh, but to visit Windsor, Oxford, Matlock, and the Cumberland Lakes.
Will you give him a drink of water, for Christ's sake?
You did not get first this time, but you were the first person to tell me to drink water. Welcome in, Curly. Okay. I do not like the mango tea. It's a bit odd. I feel like maybe if it was cold, it would be better. Possibly. I'm not sure. Or like it needs to be like mixed in with something else. Like I feel like the mango tea by itself is a bit odd. I don't know. It tastes a bit. I don't know. I think it tastes a bit odd. Okay. Where do we leave off? In this expedition, we did not intend to follow the great road to Edinburgh, but to visit Windsor, Oxford, Matlock, and the Cumberland Lakes, resolving to arrive at the completion of this tour around the end of July. I packed my chemical instruments and materials I had collected, resolving to finish my labors in some obscure nook in the northern highlands of Scotland. We quitted London on the 27th of March, and remained a few days in Windsor, rambling on its beautiful forest. This was the newest scene of our mountaineers. Majestic oaks, and quantity of game, and the herds of stately deer were all novelties to us. From hence we proceeded to Oxford. As we entered the city, our minds were filled with the remembrance of events that had been transacted there before the century and a half before. It was here that Charles I had collected his forces. This city had remained faithful to him, after the whole nation had forsaking his cause to join the standard of Parliament and liberty. The memory of that unfortunate king and his companions, the amiable Falkland and insoluble Gower, his queen and son, gave a peculiar interest in every part of the city, which they might be supposed to have inhabited. The spirits of elder days found a dwelling here, and we delighted to trace its footsteps. If these feelings had not yet found imaginary gratification, the appearance of the city had yet in itself sufficient beauty to obtain I keep messing up. Obtain our admiration. The colleges are ancient and picturesque. The streets are almost magnificent, and lovely Isis, which flows beneath it, through meadows of exquisite verdure. Is spread forth in a placid expanse of waters, which reflect its majestic assemblage of towers, and spires and domes, and embosomed upon aged trees. I enjoyed this scene, yet my enjoyment was embittered, both by the memory of the past and the anticipation of the future. I was formed for peaceful happiness during my youthful days. Discontent never visited my mind, and if I was ever overcome by ennui, the sight of what is beautiful in nature, or the study of what is excellent and sublime in the productions of man, could always interest my heart and communicate elasticity in my spirits. But I am a blasted tree, and bolts have entered my soul, and I had felt then that I should have I keep messing up. That I should survive to exhibit. Well, I shall soon cease to be a miserable spectacle of wretched humanity, pitiable to others, and abhorrent to myself. We passed a considerable period at Oxford, rambling among its environs, and endeavoring to identify every spot which must relate to the most animated epoch of English history. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. Our little voyage of discovery were often prolonged by the successful objects that presented themselves. We visited the tomb of the illustrious Hampton, in the field of which that patriot fell. For a moment my soul was elevated from its debasing and miserable fears to contemplate the divine ideas of liberty and self-sacrifice, of which these sites were the monuments and remembrancers. For an instant I dared to shake off my chains and look around with me with a free and lofty spirit. But the iron had eaten into my flesh, and I sank away, trembling and helpless with a miserable self. Water break. And tea break. I'm a big fan of this tea. One second. Oh. Never mind. We left Oxford with regrets, and proceeded to Matlock, which was our next place to rest. The country in the neighborhood of this village resembled to a greater degree the scenery of Switzerland in everything on its lower scale. The green hills went to the crown of distant white Alps, which always attend on the piney mountains of my native country. We visited the wondrous cave, and the little cabinets of natural history, where the curiosities are disposed in the same manner of collections at Servox and Communix. That's definitely mispronounced. The latter name of which made me tremble, then pronounced by Henry, and I hastened to quit Matlock, in which the terrible scene has thus associated. From Derby still, journeying northward, we passed 2 months, in Cumberland and Westmoreland. I could now almost fancy myself among the Swiss mountains, the little patches of snow, which yet lingered on the northern side of the mountains, the lakes and the dashing of rocky streams, and all familiar and dear sights of me. Here also we made some acquaintances who almost contrived to cheat me into happiness. The delights of Serval was proportionately greater than mine. His mind expanded in the company of men of talent, and he found at his own greater nature, capacities and resources that he could have imagined himself to have possessed while he associated with his inferiors. I could pass my life here, he said to me, and among these mountains I should scarcely regret Switzerland and Rhine. But he found that the traveler's life, is one that includes much more pain and amidst its enjoyments. His feelings are forever on the stretch, and when he begins to sink into repose, he finds him obliged to quit on which he rests his pleasures for something new, which again engages his attention, and which he forsakes for other novelties. He had scarcely visited the various lakes of Cumberland and Westmoreland, and conceived an affection for some of the inhabitants, when the period of our appointments with our Scotch friends approached. We never left them to travel on. For my own part, I was not sorry. I had now neglected. Oh, I completely misread that. Okay, wait, let's go back because I completely misread that. We had scarcely visited the various lakes of Cumberland and Westmoreland, and conceived an affection for some of the inhabitants, when the period of our appointments with our Scotch friend approached, and we left them to travel on. For my own part, I was not sorry. I had now neglected my promise for some time, and I feared the effects of the Damon's disappointments. He might remain in Switzerland and wreak his vengeance on my relatives. This idea pursued me and tormented me at every moment, from which I might otherwise have snatched repose and peace. I waited for my letters with feverish impatience. If they were delayed, I was miserable and overcome by 1,000 fears. When they arrived, I saw the superscription of Elizabeth, my father. I hardly dared to read it and ascertain my face. Sometimes I thought that the fiend followed me, and might expedite my I don't know what is going on with my words today. My reminiscence of murdering my companion. When these thoughts possessed me, I would not quit Henry for a moment, but followed me in his shadow to protect him from the fancied rage of his destroyer. I felt as if I had committed some great crime, and consciousness of which haunted me. I was guiltless, and had indeed drawn down a horrible curse upon my head, as mortal as that of crime. I visited Edinburgh with languid eyes in mind, and yet that city might have interested the most unfortunate being. Serval did not like it being so well, and did not like it so well in in Oxford, for the antiquity of the later city was much more pleasant to him. But the beauty and regularity of the new town of Edinburgh, its romantic castle, and its environs, the most delightful in the world, Arthur's Seat, St. Bernard's Well, and the Pentland Hills, compensated him for the change, and filled him with cheerfulness and admiration, for I was impatient to arrive in the termination of my journey. We left Edinburgh in a week, and passing through Corpar, St. Andrews, and along the banks of the Tay, to Perth, where our friend expected us. But I was in no mood to laugh and talk with strangers, or enter into their feelings or plans with the good humor expected from a guest, and accordingly I told Serval that I wished to make the tour of Scotland alone. "Do you," said I, "enjoy yourself, and let this be our rendezvous? I may be absent in a month or two, but do not interfere with my motions, I entreat you. Leave me to peace and solitude for a short time, and when I return I hope it would be with a lighter heart and more congenial in your own temper." Henry wished to dissuade me, but seeing me bent in this pain, ceased to remonstrate. He entreated me to write often. I would rather be with you, he said, in your solitary ramblings than with these Scotch people, whom I do not know. Hasten, then, my dear friend. To return I may again feel myself somewhat at home, which I cannot do in your absence. Having parted with my friend, I determined to visit some remote spot in Scotland, and finish my work in solitude. I had no doubt but that was the monster following me, and would discover himself to me when I should have finished, and he might receive his companion. With the resolution, I transfer resolution. Why did I say that word? With this resolution, I transferred the northern highlands and fixed on one of the remotest of the Orkneys as the scene of labors. It was the place fitted for such a work. Being hardly more than a rock, those high sides were continually beaten upon by the waves. The soil was barren, scarcely affording pasture for a few miserable cows, and oatmeal for its inhabitants, which consisted of 5 persons, whose gaudy and straggling limbs gave token of their miserable fare. Vegetables and bread, when they indulged in such luxuries, even fresh water, was to be cured from the mainland, which was about 5 miles distant. On the whole island there was but 3 miserable huts, and one of these was vacant when I arrived. Thus I was hired. It contained about 2 rooms, and the inhabitants of the squalidness of the most miserable pensions and thatch had fallen in. The walls were unplastered, and the doors was off its hinges. I ordered it to be repaired, bought some furniture, and took possession of incidents which would doubtless have occasioned some surprise. And not all the sons of the cottagers had been numbed by want and squalid poverty. As it was, I lived ungazed at and unmolested, hardly thanked for the pittance of food and clothes as I gave. So much does suffering blunt even the coarsest sensation of men. In this entreat I devoted the morning of labors, but it was the evening which the weather permitted. I walked on the stony beach of the sea, to listen at the waves as they roared, and dashed my feet. It was a monotonous yet ever-changing scene. I thought of Switzerland. It was far different from this desolate and appalling landscape. Its hills were covered with vines, and its cottages were scattered thickly in its plains. Its fair lakes reflected a blue and gentle sky, When troubled by the winds, their tumult is but the play of the lively infant, when compared to the roarings of the giant ocean. In this manner I distributed my occupations from which I arrived, but I proceeded in my labors. It became every day more horrible and irksome to me. Sometimes I could not prevail in myself to enter my laboratory for several days, and at other times I toiled day and night to order the complete of my work. It was indeed a filthy process in which I was engaged. During my first experiments, a kind of enthusiastic frenzy blinded me with the horrors of my employments. My mind was intently fixed on the sequel of my labors, and my eyes were shut on the horror of my proceedings. And now I went to it in cold blood, and my heart also sickened at the work of my hands. Thus situated, employed with a most detestable occupation, immersed in a solitude in which nothing could be for an instant call my attention from the actual scene in which I was engaged, my spirits became unequalled. I grew restless and nervous. Every moment I feared to meet my persecutor. Sometimes I sat with my eyes fixed on the ground, fearing to raise them lest they should encounter the object on which I was so much dread to behold. I feared to wander from the sight of which my fellow creatures, lest when alone he should come to claim his companion. In this meantime I worked on. My labors were already considerably advanced. I looked towards its completion with a tremulous and eager hope, which I dared not trust to question, but which was intermixed with obscure foreboding of evil that made my heart sicken. Okay. Chapter 3. Okay. Chapter 3. Volume 3, Chapter 3. How long is this chapter? That one is 9 pages. Perfect. Okay. We can probably fit how many chapters? I don't want to go too much because I don't have that much left. I want to at least get one more stream out of. I want to get one more stream out of this. And we are about 90 pages left, I believe. Ish. So I feel like we're like 40 more pages, so it's about 4 more chapters. Okay, water break first. And tea. Chapter 3. I need to remember to actually drink more my tea during actual reading, because then I feel like that would prolong the amount of time I can read during streams also. Not fogged up my glasses, but... Chapter 3. I sat one evening in my laboratory. The sun had set and the moon was just rising above the sea. I had not sufficient light for my employments, and I remained idle, in a pause of consideration of whether I should leave my labors for the night, or hasten its conclusion and evince unremitting attention to it. As I sat, a train of reflection occurred to me, which led me to consider the effects in which I was now doing. 3 years before, I was engaged in the same manner, had created a fiend of whose unparalleled barbarity had desolated my heart, and filled it with ever the bitterness, remorse. It was now about to form another being, of whose disposition was alike ignorant. She might become 10,000 times more malignant than her mates, and delight for its own sake in murder and wretchedness. I had soon to quit the neighborhood of men, and hide himself in deserts, but she had not, and she is all probability was to become a thinking and reasoning animal. Might refuse to comply with the compacts made before her creation. They might even hate each other. The creature who already lived loathed his own deformity, and might he not conceive a greater abhorrence for it when it became before his eyes the female form? She might turn into disgust from him to the superior beauty of man. She might quit him, and he again alone, exasperated by the fresh provocation of being deserted by one of his own species. Even if they were to leave Europe and habitate the deserts of the New World, Yet one of the first results of those sympathies of which the daemon thirsted were to be children, and a race of devils would be propagated upon the earth. He might make the very existence of a species of men condition precarious and full of terror. Had I a right for my own benefit to be inflicted the curse upon everlasting generations? Had before been moved by the sophisms of being I'd created, been struck senseless by the fiendish threats, and now for the first time the wickedness had promised burst upon me. I shuddered to think of the future ages might curse me at their pests, whom selfishness has not hesitated to buy its own peace for the price of perhaps the existence of the whole human race. I trembled and my heart failed within me. Then, on looking up, I saw by the light of the moon the daemon of the casement. A ghastly grin wrinkled his lips, and he gazed at me, where I saw fulfilling the task that he had allotted to me. Yes, he still followed me in my travels. He had loitered in forests, hid himself in caves, or taken refuge in wide and desert heaths. And he now came to mark my progress and claim the fulfillment of my promise. As I looked at him, his countenance expressed the utmost extent of malice and treachery. I thought with a sensation of madness in my promise of creating another like him. He trembled with passion, tore to pieces the things in which I was engaged. The wretch saw me destroyed the creature of those future existence he depended for happiness, and with a howl of devilish despair and of revenge, it withdrew. I left the room, and locking the door, made a solemn vow in my own heart never to resume my labors. Then, with trembling steps, I sought my own apartment. I was alone, none near me to dissipate the gloom, and relieve me from the sickening oppression and most terrible reveries. Several hours passed, and I remained near my window, gazing at the sea, and almost motionless, for the winds were hushed, and all nature reposed under my eyes of quiet moon. A few fishing vessels alone speckled the waters, and now with the gentle breeze wafted the sounds of voices. As the fishermen called to one another, I felt the silence, although I was hardly conscious of this extreme profundity, until my ears were suddenly arrested in the paddling of oars near the shores, and a person landed close to my house. And a few minutes after, I heard the crackling at my door. As if someone endeavored to open it softly, I trembled from head to toe. I felt the presentiment of who it was, and wished to rouse one of the peasants who dwelt in the cottage not too far from mine. But I was overcome with a sensation of helplessness, so often felt in frightful dreams, when you in vain endeavors to fly from an impending danger, and I was rooted in the spot. Presently I heard the sound of footsteps along the passage. The door opened, and the wretch whom I dreaded appeared, shutting door, and approached me, and said, in a smothering voice, "You have destroyed my work where you began. What is it that you intend? Do you dare to break your promise? I have endured toil and misery, and left Switzerland with you, and I crept along the shores of Rhine, among its willow islands, and over the summits of hills. I have dwelled many months in the heaths of England, and among the deserts of Scotland. I have endured incalculable fatigue, and cold and hunger. Do you dare destroy my hopes?" Because I do break. Okay, I need to. One second. Okay. Hopefully, my voice is. I usually need to clear my throat for a second, because I don't know what's with my reading lately. I think it's just I've been reading so much lately, like out loud, possibly. Okay. Begone, I do break my promise. Will never I create to know another like yourself, equal in deformity and wickedness. Slave, I before reasoned with you, but you have proved yourself unworthy of my condensation. Remember that I have power, and believe yourself miserable, but I can make you so wretched with the light of day. What would be hated on you? You are my creator, and I am your master. Obey. You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey. The hour of my weakness is past, and the period of your power has arrived. Your threats cannot move me to do as you act of wicked on. Your threats cannot move me to do an act of wickedness, but you confirm me in the resolution of not creating you and companion of vice. Shall I, in cold blood, set loose upon the earth a daemon, whose delights in death and wretchedness? Begone, I am firm, and my words only will exasperate my. I am firm, and your words will only exasperate my rage. The monster saw my determination in his face, and gnashed his teeth in the impotence of anger. Shall each man, cried he, find a wife of his bosom, and each beast have his mates, and I be alone? I have feelings of affection, and they do requited by detestation and scorn. Man, I hate you, but beware your hours will pass in dread and misery, and soon the boats will fall upon which must ravish from you your happiness forever, and you are to be happy, while I grovel in the intensity of your wretchedness. You can blast my other passions, but revenge remains. Revenge henceforth, dearest than lights or food. I may die, but first you, my tyrants, my tormentors, shall curse their son and gaze in your misery. Beware, but I am fearful, and therefore powerful. I will watch with the willingness of a snake, that I may sting with its venom. Man, I shall repent with your inquiries of conflict. Devil, cease, and do not poison the air with those sounds of malice. I have declared my resolutions to you, and I am no coward to bend beneath words. Leave me, I am exhonorable. It is well, I go, but remember, I shall be with you in your wedding night. I started forward and exclaimed, Villain, before you sign my death warrant, be sure that you are yourself safe. You are yourself safe? I would have seized him, but he allured me, and quitted the house with precipitation. In a few moments I saw him in his boats, which shot across the waters in an arrowy swiftness. We soon lost amidst the waves. All was again silent, and his words rung along my ears. I burned with rage to pursue the murderer of my own peace, and precipitate him into the ocean. I walked up and down my room, hastily and perturbed, while my imagination conjured up 1,000 images to torment and sting me. While I had not followed him and closed with him in mortal strife, but I had suffered him to depart, and he had directed his course towards the mainland. I shuddered to think of who might be the next victim of sacrifice to his insatiate why can I not pronounce that? Insatiate revenge. And I thought again to his words, I will be with you on your wedding night. That then was the period fixed on the fulfillment of my destiny. It was the hour I should die, and at once satisfied the extinguish of malice. The prospect did not move me to fear, yet I thought my beloved Elizabeth, of her tears and endless sorrow, when I should find her lover so barbarously snatched from her. Tears, the first I had shed in many months, streamed from my eyes, and resolved not to fall before my enemy without a bitter struggle. The night passed away, and the sun rose from the ocean. My feelings became calmer, if it may be called calmness, when the violence of rage sinks into the depths of despair. I left the house and horrid scene of the last night contention, and walked on the beach of the sea, when I almost regarded an insuperable barrier between me and my fellow creatures. Nay, I wished that such should prove the fact stole across me. I desired that might pass my life in the barren rock, wearied and is true, but uninterrupted by any sudden shock of misery. If I returned, it was to be sacrificed, or to see those whom I most loved die under the grasp of a daemon of whom I had myself created. I walked above the aisle like a restless spectre, separated from all it loved, and miserable in its separation. When it became noon and the sun rose higher, I lay down in the grass and was overpowered by a deep sleep. I became awake with the whole of preceding nights. My nerves were agitated, my eyes inflamed by watching the misery. The sleep in which I now sunk refreshed me. When I awoke again, felt as if belonged to a race of human beings like myself. I began to reflect upon which we had passed with a greater composure, yet still the words of the fiend rung in my ears like a death knell. They appeared like a dream, yet distinct and impressive as a reality. The sun had far descended, and I still sat on the shores, satisfying my appetites, which had become ravenous. Um, where did I leave off? With an oaten cake. That's a weird word to say, oat cake. With an oaten cake. When I saw a fishing boat land close to me, and one of the men brought me a packet. It contained letters from Geneva, and one from Seville. Entreating me to join him, he said that nearly a year had lapsed since I had quitted Switzerland, and France had yet unvisited. He entreated me, therefore, to leave my solitary isle, and meet him in Perth. In a week from that time, when we might arrange the plan of our future proceedings, this letter is a degree recalled me to life, and determined to quit an island of my expiration of 2 days. Yet before I departed, there was a task to perform, on which I shudder to reflect. I must pack my chemical instruments. For that purpose, I must enter the room which had been scene of my odious work. I must handle those utensils, the sight of which was sickening to me. The next morning, at day break, I summoned sufficient courage, and unlocked the door of my laboratory. The remains of the half-finished creature whom I had destroyed lay scattered on the floor, and I almost felt as if I had mangled the living flesh of a human being. I paused to collect myself, then entered the chamber. With a trembling hand, I conveyed the instruments out of the room, but I reflected that I ought not to leave the relics of my work to excite the horror and suspicion of the peasants, and I accordingly put them into a basket with a greater quantity of stones, and laid them up, determined to throw them into the sea that very night. In the meantime, I sat upon the beach, employed in cleaning and arranging my chemical apparatuses. Nothing could be more complete than the alteration that had taken place in my feelings since that night at the appearance of the daemon. I had before regarded my promise with a gloomy despair, as a thing that, with whatever consequences, must be fulfilled. It now felt as if it was a film that had been taken from my eyes, and that I, for the first time, saw clearly the idea of renewing my labors did not for one instant occur to me, and the threats I had heard outweighed on my thoughts, and I did not reflect that a voluntary act of mine could avert it. I had resolved in my own mind that to create another like the fiend had first made would be an act of the bastards, and most atrocious selfishness. I banished from my mind every thought that could lead to a different conclusion. Between 2 and 3 in the morning, the moon rose, and then putting my basket aboard a little skiff, sailed out from another 4 miles from the shore. In the scene, it was perfectly solitary. A few boats were returning towards land, but I sailed away from them. I felt as if I was about to commission a dreadful crime, and avoided with shuddering anxiety that I encountered with the fellow creature of one time the moon. Where did I get the moon? At one time the moon, which had before been clear, and suddenly overspread by a thick cloud. And I took an advantage at the moment of darkness and cast my basket into the sea. I listened to the gurgling sound as it sunk, and then sailed away from the spot. The sky became clouded and the air was pure, although chilled in the northeast breeze that was rising, but in refreshing me and filled me with such agreeable sensations that I resolved to prolong my stay into the water, and fixing the rudder in a direct position, stretched myself to the bottom of the boat. Clouds hid the moon, everything was obscure, and I heard only the sound of the boat on its keel cuts through the waves. The murmur lulled me, and in a short time I slept soundly. I do not know how long I remained in this situation, but when I awoke, I found that the sun was already mounted considerably. The wind was high, and the waves continually threatened the safety of my little skiff. I found that the wind was northeast, and must have driven me far from the coast to which I had embarked. I endeavored to change my course, but I quickly found that it again made an attempt to the boat would instantly filled with water. Thus situated, the only source was to drive before the wind. I confess that I felt a few sensations of terror. I had no compass with me, and it was so little acquainted with the geography of the parts of the world that the sun was of little benefit to me. I might be driven into the wide Atlantic, and feel all the tortures of starvation, to be swallowed up in the immeasurable water that roared and buffeted around me. I had already been out many hours, and felt the torments of the burning thirst, a prelude to my other sufferings and looks up to the heavens, which were covered in clouds that flew before the wind, only to be replaced by others. I looked upon the scene, and it would be my grave fiend. I exclaimed, "Your task is already fulfilled." I thought of Elizabeth and my father, and of Servon sunk into the reverie, so despairing and frightful, that even now, when the scene is on the point of closing before me forever, I shudder to reflect on it. Some hours passed thus, but by degrees, as the sun declined towards the horizon, the wind died away into a gentle breeze, and the sky became free from breakers, but these gave place to a heavy swell. I felt sick and hardly able to hold the rudder, when suddenly I saw a line of high land towards the south. I almost spent, as I was, by fatigue and the dreadful suspense I endured for several hours. This sudden certainty of life rushed like a flood of warmth of joy into my heart, and tears gushed from my eyes. How mutable are our friends, and how strange that the clinging love we have to life, even in the excess of misery. I constructed another sail with a part of my dress, and eagerly steered my course towards the land. Had a wild and rocky appearance, but I approached nearer. I easily perceived the traces of cultivation. I saw vessels near the shore, and I found myself suddenly transported back to the neighborhood of civilization, neighbor of civilized men. Pop in to lurk, but I have to get right. Okay, I appreciate you being here. Alright, what are you doing today? Is it Elden Ring still? I think I'm gonna do another double stream tonight. I feel like, cause I don't know, I miss doing double streams. I'm not really sure what I should stream tonight though, cause I don't know if I should really do I might do Sims 4. Sim, I kind of want to save that for tomorrow, so I might do Fallout 76.
Will you give him a drink of water for Christ's sake?
You're still here? Oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you for the water. I desperately needed that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Should I do Fallout 76 tonight? Again? I might continue the Mistress of Mysteries questline for that. But I also want to figure out another game to play, because I don't know, I'm kind of not that bored. I just kind of want to play something else besides The Sims and Minecraft. Like I want, and it's Fallout 76. I want to do something like more different. I don't know. I'm not sure. Ooh, okay, not tonight, but after. I'm not sure. I kind of want to play Horizon Zero Dawn again, and I really want to play Forbidden West. I haven't played Forbidden West yet, so I could at some point do Horizon Zero Dawn. Alright, one more drink before. Perhaps I'm gonna start right here, because I'm not sure where I left off. How mutable are our feelings? How strange that clinging love we have of life, even in the excess of misery. I constructed another sail with parts of my dress, and eagerly steered my course towards the land. It had a wild and rocky appearance, but as I approached nearer, I easily perceived the traces of cultivation. I saw vessels near the shore, and I found myself suddenly transported back to the neighborhood of civilized man. I eagerly traced the windings to the land, and hailed a steeple which I at length saw issuing from behind a small promontory. Actually, should I try to stream Marvel Rivals again tonight? Because the last time I streamed it was like a couple months ago, like when I first started streaming, and it was so laggy that was like unwatchable. But I actually want to see if I can actually stream it tonight without it being super laggy. I don't know. I want to get back into that game. But okay. I saw vessels near the shore, and I found myself suddenly transported back in the neighborhood of civilized man. I eagerly traced the wildlings to the land. I hailed a steeple which I at length saw issuing from behind a small promontory. I was at a state of extreme debility. I resolved to sail directly towards the town of a place where I could not most easily procure nourishment. Fortunately, I had money with me. As I turned the promontory, I perceived a small, neat town and a good harbor, which I entered, my heart pounded with joy at my unexpected escape. As I was occupied in fixing the boat and arranging the sails, several people cowered towards the spots, and they seemed very surprised at my appearance, but instead of offering me any assistance, whispered together with gestures at any other time, might have produced in me a slight sensation of alarm. As it was, I merely remarked that they spoke English, and I therefore addressed them in that language. My good friends, said I, will you be so kind to tell me the name of this town and inform me where I am? You will know that soon enough, replied a man with a gruff voice. Maybe you are come to my place and I have not. A man with a gruff voice. Maybe you are come to a place that will not prove much of your taste, but you will come to consult it with your quarters, I promise you. I was exceedingly surprised on receiving so rude an answer from a stranger, but I was also disconcerted on perceiving the frown of angry countenance of his companion. Why do you answer me so roughly? I replied. Surely it is not the custom of Englishmen to receive strangers so inhospitably. I do not know, said the man. The customs of the English may be, but in this custom of Irish so hate villains. While this strange dialogue continued, I perceived the crowd of rapidly increased. Their faces expressed a mixture of curiosity and anger, which annoyed in some degree alarmed me. I inquired the way of the inn, and no one replied, then moved forward, and a murmuring arose from the crowd as they followed and surrounded me. When the ill-looking man approached him, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, Come, sir, you must follow me to Mr. Kerwin's and give an account of yourself. Who is Mr. Kerwin? Why am I to give an account of myself? Is not this a free country? Aye, sir, free enough for honest folks. Mr. Kerwin is a magistrate, and you are to give an account of the death of a gentleman who was found murdered here last night. Who is Mr. Kerwin? Why am I to give an account of myself? Is not this a free country? Aye, sir, free enough for honest folks. But Mr. Kerwin is a magistrate, and I already read this part Okay. This answer startled me, but I presentedly recovered myself. I was innocent, that could be easily proven accordingly. I followed my conductor in silence, and I was led to one of the best houses in the town. I was ready to sink from fatigue and hunger, but being surrounded by a crowd had thought and politics to arouse all my strength that no physical debility might be constructed into an apprehension of conscious guilt. Little did I expect the calamity that was in a few moments to overwhelm me, and extinguish in horror and despair all fear of ignominy or death. I must pause here, for it requires all the fortitude to recall the memory the frightful events on which I am about to relate in proper detail to my recollection. Water and tea break. I'm doing one more walk of tea. Okay, how many pages is this? But is this chapter? Okay, after this next chapter, which is 9 pages, we do a quick bathroom break and come back. Chapter 4. I was soon introduced into the presence of the magistrates, an old benevolent man, with common man and mild manners. He looked upon me, however, with some degree of severity, and then turning towards my conductors, he asked who appeared as witness to this occasion. About half a dozen men came forward, and one being selected by the magistrate, he deposed. And he had been out fishing the night before with his son and brother-in-law, Daniel Nugent. When, about 10 o'clock, they observed a strong northern blast rising, they accordingly put for ports. It was a very dark night, as the moon was not yet risen. He did not land in the harbor, but as they'd been accustomed, as a creek about 2 miles below, he walked out first, carrying a part of the fishing tackle. His companions followed him at some distance. As he was proceeding along the sands, he struck a foot against something and fell to his length in the ground. His companions came up to assist him, and by the light of their lantern they found that he had fallen on the body of a man who was about all appearance dead. Their first supposition was that it was the corpse of some person who had been drowned, and all had thrown on shore of the waves. But upon examination, they found that the clothes were not wet, and even the body was not cold. They instantly carried it to the cottage of an old woman near the spot, and endeavored, but in vain, to restore it to life. He appeared to be a handsome young man, about 25 years of age. He had apparently been strangled, but there was no sign of any violence except the black markings of fingers on the neck. The first part of my deposition did not at the least interest me, but when the marks of the fingers were mentioned, I remembered the murder of my brother, and I felt myself extremely agitated. My limbs trembled, and the mist came over my eyes, which obliged me to lean in the chair of support. The magistrates observed me with a keen eye, and of course drew an unfavorable augury from my manner. The son confirmed his father's accounts. From Daniel Nugent was called, he swore positively that just before the fall of his companion, he saw a boat with a single man short distance from the shore, and as far as he could judge by the light of the few stars, it was the same boat to which I had just landed. The one deposed that she lived near the beach, was standing at the door of her cottage, waiting for the return of the fishermen. About an hour before she heard the discovery of the body, in which she saw a boat with only one man in it, push it off from the parts of the shore where the corpse was afterwards found. Another woman confirmed the accounts of the fishermen had been brought to the body into her house. It was not cold. They put it into the bed and rubbed it, and Daniel went to the town as an apothecary, and life was but life was quite gone. Several other men were examined concerning my landing, and they agreed that with the strong north wind that had arisen during the night, it was very probable that had beaten about in many hours, had been obligated to return early to the same spot to which I had departed. Besides, they observed that there was appeared had been brought the body from another place. It was likely that did not appear to know the shore. I might have put it into the harbor, ignorant of the distance of the town. But from the place of where I had deposed of the corpse. Why am I reading like this today? I have no idea. Okay, for context, why I did like a weird stop was because there is like a line right there that like there's a line right there. I can't think of the word. Yeah. Just why I took a little pause. Mr. Kerwin, on hearing the evidence, desired that I should be taken to the room where the body lay for interment, that I might be observed and what effects the sights would be produced from me. This idea was probably suggested by the extreme agitation I had exhibited from the mode of the murder. The mode of the murder had been described. I was accordingly conducted by the magistrate and several other persons to the inn. I could not help being struck by the strange coincidence that I had taken place during this eventful night. But knowing that I had been conversing with several persons in the island I inhabited about the time that the body had been found, I was perfectly tranquil as to the consequences of the affair. I entered the room where the corpse lay, and it was led up to the coffin. How can I describe my sensations of beholding it? I fell yet parched with horror, nor can I reflect on the terrible moments without shuddering in agony, that faintly remind me of the anguish of recollection. The trial, the presence of the magistrate and the witnesses, passed like a dream in my memory. When I saw the lifeless form of Henry Serval stretched before me, I gasped for breath, and was throwing myself on the body. I exclaimed, "Have my murderous machinations deprived you also, my dearest Henry, to live life? Two I have already destroyed. Other victims awaited their destiny, but you, Serval, my friend, my benefactor." The human frame could no longer support my agonizing suffering that I had endured, and I was carried out of the room with strong convulsions. A fever succeeded to this. I lay for 2 months on the point of death. My ravings had, as I afterwards heard, were frightful as I called myself the murderer of William, of Justine, and Serval. Sometimes I entreated my attendants to assist me in the destruction of the fiend, of whom I was tormented, and at others I felt the fingers of the monster had already grasped my neck, and I screamed along with agony and terror. Unfortunately, as I spoke my native language, Mr. Kerwin alone understood me. My gestures had bitter cries were sufficient to affright the other witnesses. Why did I not die? More miserable than man had ever was before? Why did I not sink into forgetfulness and rest? Death snatches away many blossoming children and only hopes of their doting parents. How many brides and youthful lovers had been one day in the plume of health and hope, the next a prey for worms and decay in the tomb? Of what materials was I made that I could thus resist so many shocks, which, like the turning of the wheel, continually renewed the torture? But I was doomed to live, and in 2 months found myself as awakened from a dream in a prison, stretched in the wretched bed, surrounded by gaolers, turnkeys, bolts, and all the miserable apparatuses of a dungeon. I had forgotten the particulars in which had happened, only felt that as if some great misfortune had suddenly overwhelmed me. But I looked around, and I saw the barrel windows, and the squalidness of the room in which I was. All flashed across my memory as I groaned bitterly. This sound disturbed an old woman, who was sleeping in a chair beside me. She was a hired nurse, the wife of one of the turnkeys, and her countenance expressed all of those had qualities which often characterized the class. The lines of her face were hard and rude, like the person's accustomed to see without sympathy in sights of misery. Her tones expressed her entire indifference. She addressed me in English, and the voice struck to me the one I had heard in my sufferings. "Are you better now, sir?" she said. Said she. I replied in the same language, with a feeble voice. "I believe I am, but if it be all true, if indeed I did not dream, I am sorry that I am still alive to feel this misery and horror." Can I take the first road? Wait, what? You cannot take the wait. No. Mm-mm. Winter got first before you did. Huh? Well, Winter got first. I'm confused. I need to cut my bangs. My bangs are getting so long right now. I can see the baby hairs right here. Oh my goodness. The joke because it was an hour since they started. Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. Okay, where did I leave off? Almost out of tea. Jacob, have you played Marvel Rivals? I was thinking of maybe playing Rivals as a stream after this. Because I haven't played that in so long. I played it last night for like 3 games, but before that I haven't played in months before that though. Okay, I'm just gonna go right here because we did read a little bit of it. I got a bit distracted. "Are you better now, sir?" said she. I replied in the same language with a feeble voice. "I believe I am, but if it is all true, and if indeed I did not dream, I am sorry that I still feel alive to feel the misery and horror." Wait, what? "I am sorry that I am still alive to feel this misery and horror." For that matter," replied the old woman, "if you mean about the gentleman you murdered, I believe it was better for you if you were dead, for I fancy it will go hard with you. But you will be hung when the next sessions come on. However, that's none of my business. I will set to nurse. I am set to nurse you and get you well. I do my duty with a safe conscience. If it was well, everybody did the same." I turned with loathing from the woman who was so unfeeling a speech to of a person just saved, on the very edge of death. But I felt languid, unable to reflect on that had passed. The whole series of my life appeared to me in a dream. I sometimes doubted if indeed it was all true, for it was never presented itself in my mind with the force of reality. As the image that floated before me became more distinct, I grew feverish. A darkness pressed around me. No one was near me who soothed me with the gentle voice of love. No dear hand supported me, and the physician came and prescribed medicines, and the old woman prepared them for me. But utter carelessness was feeble in the first, and expression of brutality was strong marked in the visage of the second, who could be uninterested in the facts of a murderer. But the hangman would still gain his fee. These were my first reflections, but I soon learned that Mr. Kerwin had shewn me kindness. He had caused the best room in the prison to be prepared for me. Wretched indeed was the best, and it had been he who had the privilege of physician and nurse. It is true he seldom came to see me, for although he ardently desired to relieve the sufferings of every human creature, he did not wish to present at the agonies and miserable ravings of a murderer. He came, therefore, sometimes to see that I was not neglected, but his visits were short, and at long intervals. One day, when I was gradually recovering, I was seated in a chair, my eyes half open and my cheeks livid. like those in death. I was overcome by gloom and misery, and often reflected that I had better seek death that remains miserably, pent up only to let loose in the world replete with wretchedness. At one time I considered myself I should not declare myself guilty, in suffering the penalty of the law, less innocent than poor Justine had been. Such were my thoughts when the door of my apartment was open. Mr. Kerwin entered. His countenance expressed sympathy, and the compassion he drew a chair close to mine. They addressed me in French. I fear this place is very shocking to you. Can I do anything that makes you more comfortable? I thank you, but all you mention is nothing to me. On the whole earth, that is no comfort where I am capable of receiving. I know that the sympathy of a stranger can be but a little relief to one borne down as you are by so strange a fortune, but you will, I hope, soon quit the melancholy abode, for doubtless evidence can easily be brought to free you from this criminal charge. That is the least concern of me. That is the least concern of. Why do I keep messing up this line? That is the least concern. I am, by of course, of strange events, become the most miserable of mortals. Prosecuted and tortured as I have been, can death be of any evil to me? Nothing indeed could be more unfortunate and agonizing than the strange chances that have lately occurred. You were thrown by some surprising accident on the shore, renowned by its hospitality, seized immensely and charged with murder. The first sight that was presented to your eyes was the body of your friend, murdered by an unaccountable manner, and placed, as it were, by some fiend across your path. As Mr. Kerwin said this, notwithstanding the agitation of it endeavored. On the retrospect of my sufferings, I also felt considerable surprising on the knowledge that seemed to possess concerning me. I suppose in some astonishment was exhibited in a countenance, for Mr. Kerwin hastened to say, "It was not until a day or two after your illness that I thought of examining your dress, and I might discover some traces by which I could send your relations an account of your misfortune and illness. I found several letters, and among others, one, which I discovered from the commencement to be from your father. I instantly wrote to Geneva. Nearly 2 months have elapsed since the departure of my letter, but you are ill. Even now you tremble, and you are unfit for agitation of any kind. This suspense is 1,000 times worse than your most horrible event. Tell me what the new scene of death has been acted, and whose murder I am now lament." "Your family is perfectly well," said Mr. Curlow, with gentleness, "and someone, a friend, has come to visit you." I know not what chain of thought the idea presented itself, but instantly darted into my mind that a murderer had come to mock at my misery, and taunt me with the death observable, as a new incitement to me to comply with his hellish desires. I put my hand before my eyes and cried out in agony, "Oh, take him away! I cannot see him! For God's sake, do not let him enter!" Mr. Kroll regarded me with a troubled countenance. He could not help regarding my exclamations of presumption of my guilt, and said in rather a severe tone, "I should have thought, young man, that presents for your father would have welcome, instead of inspiring such violent repugnance." "My father?" cried I, while every feature of every muscle was relaxed from anguish to pleasure. "Is my father indeed come? How kind, how very kind! But where is he? Why does he not hasten to me?" My change of manner surprised and pleased the magistrates. Perhaps he thought that my former exclamation was momentary return of delirium, and now he instantly resumed his former benevolence. He rose and quitted the room with my nurse, In a moment my father entered it. Nothing at this moment could have given me greater pleasure than the arrival of my father. He stretched out my hand to him and cried, "Are you then safe, and Elizabeth in earnest?" My father calmed me with assurance of their welfare, and endeavored by dwelling of these subjects so interesting in my heart to raise my desponding spirits. And he soon felt that a prison cannot be the abode of cheerfulness. "What a pleasure is it that you inhabit, my son," he said, looking mournfully at the barreled windows and wretched appearance of the room. "You travel to seek happiness, but this fatality seems to pursue you, and poor Serval." The name of my unfortunate and murdered friend was an agitation too great to be endured by my weakened state. I shed tears. "Alas, yes, my father," replied I. "Some destiny that the most horrible kind hangs over me. I must live to fulfill it, or surely I should have died in the coffin of Henry." We were not allowed to converse at any length of time, for the precarious state of my health, and rendered every precaution necessary that they could ensure tranquillity. Mr. Kerwin came in and insisted that my strength could not be exhausted by too much exertion, but the appearance of my father was to me like that of a good angel. I gradually recovered my health. Till my sickness quitted me, I was absorbed by a gloomy and black melancholy that nothing could dissipate. The image of Serval was forever before me, ghastly and murdered. More than once, the agitation of which those reflections threw me made my friends dread a dangerous relapse. Alas, why had they preserved so miserable and destitute of life? I was sure that I might fulfill my destiny, which now drawing to a close. Soon, oh very soon, will death extinguish these throbbings, and relieve me from the mighty weight of anguish, and bears me to the dust. And in excusing the word of justice, I shall also sink to rest. Then the appearance of death was distant, though the wish has ever presented my thoughts. I often sat for hours motionless and speechless, wishing for some mighty revolution that might bury me in my destroyer in its ruins. The season of my assizes approached. I had already been 3 months in prison, and although I was still weak, and in continual danger of my relapse, I was obliged to travel nearly 100 miles in the country town where the court was held. Mr. Kerwin charged himself with every care of collecting witnesses and arranged my defense. I was spared to the disgrace of appearing publicly as a criminal, and the case was not brought before the court that decided on life and death. The grand jury rejected the bill, as it's been proven that I was on the Orkney Islands in the hour the body of my friend was found, and fortnight after my removal I was liberated from prison. My father was enraptured on finding me freed from the vexations of a criminal charge, that I again allowed to breathe the fresh atmosphere, and allowed to return to my native country. I did not participate in that feelings for me, for it was me the walls of a dungeon, or a palace or all hateful. The cups of life was poisoned forever, and although the sun shone upon me as upon a happy and gay of hearts, I saw around me nothing but dense and frightful darkness, perpetrated by no lights but the glimmer of 2 eyes that glared upon me. Sometimes they were the expressive eyes of Henry, languished in death, and dark orbs nearly covered in the lids of the long black lashes that fringed them. Sometimes it was the watery cloud's eyes of the monster, as I first saw them in the chamber of Eggleston. My father tried to awake me in the feelings of affection. He talked of Geneva, which I should soon visit, of Elizabeth and Ernest, but these words only drew groans from me. Sometimes, indeed, I felt a wish of happiness, and thoughts with melancholy delights of my beloved cousin, or longed with a devouring malady de plaise to see once more the blue lakes and rapid Rhone, had been so dear to me in my early childhood. But my general state of feelings was a torpor, from which a prison was so welcome a residence as the divinest scene of nature. These fits were seldom interrupted. In the paroxysm of anguish and despair. At these moments, I often endeavored to put an end to the existence I loathed, and it required unceasing attendance of vigilance to restrain me from committing some dreadful act of violence. I remember as I quitted the prison, I heard one of the men say, "He may be innocent of the murder, but he has certainly a bad consciousness." Those words struck me. A bad consciousness? Yes, sure, I had one. William Justine Serval had died through my infernal machinations, and whose death cried it is to finish tragedy. Ah, my father, do not remain of this wretched country. Take me where I may forget myself, my existence, and of the world. My father easily acceded to my desires, and after having taken leave of Mr. Kilwin, we hastened to Dublin. I felt as if I was relieved of heavy weights, and when the packet sailed from a fair wind from Ireland had quitted forever the country which had been to me the scene of so much misery. It was midnight. My father slept in a cabin, and I lay on the deck, looking for the stars and listened to the dashings of the waves. I hailed at the darkness and shut Ireland from the sights, and my pulse beat with a feverish joy. And I reflected that I should soon see Geneva. A passing appeared to me in the light of a frightful dream, yet the vessel of which I was, and the wind that blew me from the detested shore of Ireland, and the sea which surrounded me, told me too forcefully that I was deceived by no vision, and that Serval, my friend and the dearest companion, had fallen a victim to me and the monster of my creation. I repassed my memory of my whole life, my quiet happiness, while residing with my family in Geneva, the death of my mother, and the departure of Eggleston. I remember shuddering at the mad enthusiasm that hurried me to my creation of my hideous enemy. I called to mind the night during which when he first lived. I was unable to pursue the training of thoughts. A thousand feelings pressed upon me. As I wept bitterly, ever since my recovery from the fever, I had been in the custom of taking every night a small quantity of laudanum, for it was by means of this drug only that I was enabled to gain the rest necessary of the preservation of life. Oppressed by recollection of my various misfortunes, I took a double dose from the soon slept profoundly. But sleep did not afford me respite. From thoughts and misery, my dreams presented 1,000 objects that scared me. Towards morning, I was possessed by a kind of nightmare. I felt the fiend grasp at my neck, and could not free myself from it. Groans and cries rung in my ears. My father, who was watching over me, perceived my restlessness and awoke me, pointing to the port of Holyhead, which we are now entering. Okay, I'm going to take a quick bathroom break. We've already read 2 chapters today. Wait, no. We read 3. No? We read 2. Never mind. I don't know where I got 3 from. We're probably going to read 2 more chapters. Let's see.
Will you give him a drink of water for Christ's sake?
Give me a second. It's one long no? Wait. Okay. Okay. Maybe 3. I want to get to 200. So, and we're at 178 right now. So probably 3 more chapters. I will be right back. You just swap over to... Oh, wait. Water first. I also need to get more water. Where is my... Oh, it's right there. Okay. I am back. I almost forgot to fill my water. I came back downstairs, about to click transition again, and then I was like, oh wait, no, I forgot to refill my water. So, yeah. um, at least there's less ice in it now, because I forgot to get water without ice, because ice and reading do not go well together. Yeah. But hopefully today, not today, hopefully now, my voice should be better. Um, how about 2 or 3 more chapters, depending on how my voice goes? Okay, chapter 5. I resolved not to go to London, but to cross the country to Portsmouth, and hence to embark for Havre. I preferred this plan principally, because I dreaded to see again those places on which I had enjoyed for a few months of tranquility with my beloved Serval. I thought with horror of seeing again these persons who have been accustomed to visit together, who might also inquire of concerning an event, in very remembrance of which I had made again feel the pang I endured when I gazed on his lifeless form in the inn at blank. Not blank, like it's it's another one of the, where is it? Oh, right there. Where it's like a line. As for my father, his desires and exertions were bounded to this again, seemed restored to health and peace of mind. Again, tenderness and attentions were unremitted. My grief and gloom were obsolete. Oh, that is gonna bug me. What is wrong? Why is my mic doing that? That's better. I don't know why that just bugged me for a second. His tenderness and attentions were unremitted in my grief and gloom of abstinence, but he would not despair. Sometimes he thought that I felt deeply in the degradation of being obliged to answer a charge of murder. He had endeavored to prove me the profundity of pride. Alas, my father, said I, how little do you know me? Human beings, their feelings and passions, would indeed be degraded. If such a wretch as I felt pride, Justine, very unhappy Justine, was as innocent as I, and she suffered the same charge. She died for it. I am the cause of this. I murdered her. William, Justine, and Henry, they were all dead on my hands. My father had often, during my imprisonment, heard me make the same assertion, when I thus accused myself, but sometimes seemed to desire an explanation, and at others he appeared to consider it as a cause of my delirium, and that, during my illness, some idea of this had presented itself to my imagination, a remembrance of which I had preserved in my convalescence. I avoided explanation, maintained a continual silence concerning the wretch I had created. I had feelings that I should be supposed man, but this has forever chained my tongue when I would have given the whole world to have confined the fatal secrets. Upon this occasion, my father said, with an expression of unbounded wonder, "What do you mean, Victor? Are you mad? My dear son, I entreat you never make such a assertion again." "I am not mad," I cried energetically. "The Son of the heavens, who have viewed my operations, can bear witness to my truth. I am the assassin of those most innocent victims, and they died by my machinations. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's machinin? It's not. It has to be machination. No, I don't know. 1,000 times I have shed my own blood. Drop by drop I have saved their lives. But I could not, my father indeed could not sacrifice the whole human race." The conclusion of the speech convinced my father that the ideas were deranged, and he instantly changed the subject from our conversations, and endeavored to alter the course of my thoughts. He wished as much as possible to sorry. He wished as much as possible to obliterate the memory of the scenes that had taken place in Ireland, and never allured to them or suffered me to speak of my misfortunes. At times passed away, I became more calm, misery and her dwellings in my heart, but I no longer talked with the same incoherent manner of my own crimes. Sufficient for me the most consciousness of them. By the utmost self-violence, I curbed the imperious voice of wretchedness, which sometimes I desired to declare itself to the whole world. My manners were calmer and more composed than they had ever been since my journey as the Sea of Ice. We arrived at so it's Havr. No, Havre. So Havre on the 8th of May, and instantly proceeded to Paris, where my father had some business to which detained us for a few weeks. In the city, I received the following letter from Elizabeth. My dearest friend, it gave me great pleasure to receive a letter from my uncle in Paris. You are no longer at the formidable distance, but I may hope to see you in less than a fortnight. Sorry. My poor cousin, how much she must have suffered. I expect to see you looking for more ill than you have quitted Geneva. This winter had been passed more miserably, tortured, and had been anxious suspense. Yet I hope to see peace on your countenance, and find that your heart is not totally devoid of comfort and tranquility. Yet I fear the same feelings now exist that you may be so miserable a year ago, perhaps augmented by time, and I would not disturb you in this period, with so many misfortunes weigh upon you. But a conversation that I had with my uncle, previous on his departure, rendered some explanations necessary before we meet. Explanation, you may possibly say? What can Elizabeth have to explain? If you really say this, my questions are answered, and I have no more to do than to sign myself. I have no more to do than to sign myself your affectionate cousin. But you are distant from me, and it is impossible that you may dread, and yet be pleased with this explanation. It is a probability of this being the case. I dare not any longer postpone writing what, during your absence, I have often wished to express to you, but I have never had the courage to begin with. You well know, Victor, that our union had been the favorable plan of your parents ever since our infancy. We were told that this when young, and taught to look forward to it by events that would certainly take place. We were affectionate playfellows during childhood, and I believe dear the valued friends to one another as we grew older. But as brothers and sisters often entertain a lively affection towards each other, without desiring more than a more intimate union. May that also be our case? Tell me, dearest Victor, answer me, I conjure you, by our mutual happiness and simple truth, do you not love another? You have traveled, and you have spent several years of your life at Ilkeston, and I have confessed to you, my friend, and when I saw you last autumn so unhappy, flying into solitude from the society of every creature, I dare not help supposing that you might regret our connection, and I believe yourself bound in honor to fulfill the wishes of your parents, although they opposed themselves. Oh, I don't know what that just scared me. I don't know. I thought that this was like, can you even see that? You can't see that. I thought that this thing on the side was like a bug for some reason. My book like hit the side of it and it flung up for a second. It scared me. Okay. Where did we leave off? This is false reasoning. I confess to you, my cousin, that I love you, and that in your airy dreams and in my airy dreams of futurity. Futurity? You have been my constant friend and companion, but as your happiness I desire as well as my own. When I declare to you that our marriage would render me eternally miserable, unless it were to dictate your own free choice. Even now I wept to think that bore down that you are to my cruel. Why am I so confused right now? Even now I wept to think that bore down you are by the cruelest misfortune you may stifle. By the word's honor, all hope that love and happiness would alone restore to yourself. I, who have been so interested in affection for you, may increase your miseries tenfold by being an obstacle to your wishes. Ah, Victor, be assured that your cousin and playmate has too sincere a love for you not to have been made miserable by the superstition. Yeah. Be happy, my friend. If you obey me in this one request, remain satisfied that nothing on earth will have the power to interrupt my tranquility. Do not let this letter disturb you. Do not answer it tomorrow, or the next day, or even until you come. Even if it gives you pain, my uncle will send me news of your health, and if I see you one smile on your lips when we meet, occasioned by this or another exertion of mine, I shall need no other happiness. I need to move this real quick. Okay. Elizabeth. Geneva, May 18th. Oh, sorry. Oh, Arthur is still streaming? How long he's been streaming for? Almost 3 hours? He's reading the Fellowship of the Ring. That's really cool. Okay. This letter revived in my memory what I had forgotten. The threat of the fiend, I will be with you on your wedding night. Such was my sentence, and the other nights will be Damon employ every art to destroy me, and tear me from the glimpse of happiness which promised partly to console my sufferings. On that night it had determined to consummate his crimes in my death. Well, be it so. A deadly struggle would assuredly take place, in which he was victorious. I should be at peace with his power over me at the end. If he was vanquished, I should be a free man. Alas, what freedom! Such as my pleasance and joys when his family has been massacred before his eyes, his cottage burned, his lands are laid waste. He is turned adrift, homeless, penniless, and alone but free. Such would be my liberty, except that is my Elizabeth I possess a treasure. Alas, balanced by those horrors of remorse and guilt, whose would pursue me until death. Sweet and beloved Elizabeth. I read and reread her letters, and some softened feelings stole into my heart, and dared to whisper parasitical dreams of love and joy. But the apple was already eaten, and the angel's arms sparrowed to drive me from all hope. Yet I would die to make her happy. If the monster executed his threats, death was inevitable. Yet again I considered whether my marriage would hasten my fates. My destruction might indeed arrive a few months sooner, but as my torturer should suspect that I postponed it, influences of his menaces, he would surely find others, and perhaps more dreadful means of revenge. He has vowed to be with me on my wedding night, yet he did not consider that threat as binding him to peace in the meantime. For as if it assured me that he was not yet satiated with blood, he has murdered Serval immediately. Okay, why is my stream being weird? Okay, there it is. That's better. Okay. I resolved, therefore, that my immediate union with my cousin would conduce either her or my father's happiness. My adversary's designs against my life should not retire it to a single hour. In this state of mind, I wrote to Elizabeth. My letter was calm and affectionate. My dear, my beloved girl, I said, little happiness remain for us on earth, yet all that I may one day enjoy is consecrated to you. Chase away your idle fears. To you alone do I consecrate my life. In my endeavors for contentment, I have one secret, Elizabeth, a dreadful one. When revealed to you, it will chill your frame with horror, and then, far from being surprised at your misery, you will only wonder that I survive what I have endured. I will confide this tale of misery and terror to you the day that after our marriage shall take place. For my sweet cousin, there must be perfect confidence between us. But until then, I conjure you not to mention or allude to it. This is the most earnest entreat, and I know you will comply. In about a week after my arrival of Elizabeth's letter, we returned to Geneva. My cousin welcomed me with warm affections, yet tears were in her eyes, and she beheld my emancipated frame and feverish cheeks. I saw a change in her also. She was thinner. She had lost much of that heavenly vivacity that had before charmed me. Her gentleness and soft looks of compassion made her more fit companion for one blasted and miserable as I was. Her tranquillity when I was noted did not endure. Memories brought madness with it, and when I thought of what had passed on, a real insanity possessed me. Sometimes I was furious and burnt with rage, sometimes low and despondent. I neither spoke or looked, but sat motionless, bewildered by the multitude of miseries that overcame me. Hi, how are you doing today? My voice is starting to hate me. Elizabeth alone had the power to draw me from these fits. Did I already read that part? Wait. I'm gonna go back a little bit because I don't know if I don't remember if I read that part. I neither spoke nor looked, but sat motionless, bewildered by the multitude of miseries that overcame me. Elizabeth alone had the power to draw me from these fits. Her gentle voice would soothe me when transported by passion, and inspire me with human feelings when sunk in torpor. She wept with me and for me. When reasons returned, she would redemonstrate in endeavors to inspire me with resignment. It is well to be the most unfortunate to be resigned, but in the guilty of there is no peace. The agonies of remorse poison the luxury that there is otherwise sometimes found and indulge in the excess of grief. Soon after my arrival, my father spoke with the immediate marriage of my cousin. I remained silent. Have you, then, some other attachments? None on earth. I love Elizabeth and looked forward to our union with delight. Let the day, therefore, be fixed on it, and will consecrate myself in life or death, to my happiness, to my cousin. My dear Victor, do not speak thus. Heavy misfortunes have befallen us, but let us only cling closer to what remains, and transfer our love to those who have lost, to those who yet live. Our circle will be small, but bound close to the ties of the affection and mutual misfortune. And when time shall have softened your despair, new and dear objects will be born to replace those of whom you have so cruelly deprived. Wait, what? When time shall have softened your despair, new and dear objects of care shall be born to replace those of whom you have been so cruelly deprived. Okay, I read that wrong. I was confused for a second. Okay. Such were the lessons of my father, but to me the remembrance of the threats return, nor can you wonder that omnipotent as the fiend had yet been in his deeds of blood. I shall almost regard him as invincible, and that when he had produced the words, I shall be with you on your wedding night, I shall regard your threatened fate as unavoidable, but death was no evil to me, if the loss of Elizabeth was balanced with it, and therefore with the contented with cheerful countenance. Agree that my father, that if my cousin would consent, the ceremony shall take place in 10 days, and thus put, as I imagine, the seal on my fate. Great God, is it one instance of thoughts that might be hellish intentions of my fiendish adversary? I would rather have banished myself from my native country, and wandered a friendless outcast over the earth, than have consented to this miserable marriage. But possessed of magic powers, the monster had blinded me from his real intentions. And when I thought that I prepared only my own death, I hastened that a far dearer victim. As the period fixed in our marriage drew nearer, whether from a cowardice or a prophetic feeling, I felt my heart sink within me. I concealed my feelings as my parents' hilarity that brought smiles and joy in the countenance of my father, but hardly deceived that ever watchful and nicer eyes of Elizabeth. She looked forward to our union with placid contentment, not unimaged with the little fear in which past misfortunes impressed. From now appeared certain intangible happiness, might soon dissipate into the airy dream, and leave no trace but deep and everlasting regrets. Preparations were made from the event. Congratulatory visits were received, and all wore a smiling appearance. I shut up and well as I could with my own heart and anxiety that preyed up there, and entered with seeming earnest into the plans of my father, although that might only serve the decorations of my tragedy. A house that was purchased to us near Coligny, in which we should enjoy the pleasures of the country, and yet be so near Geneva as to see my father every day, which would still reside within the walls, and for the benefit of Ernest, and he might follow the studies of the schools. In the meantime, I took every precaution to defend my person. In case the fiend should openly attack me, I carried pistols and daggers constantly around me. I was ever to watch the perfect artifice, and those means gained a greater degree of tranquillity, indeed, as the period approached, and threat appeared more of a delusion, not to be regarded as worthy as disturbed at my peace. Whilst the happiness I hoped for in the marriage wore a greater appearance of certainty in the days fixed from its solemnization drew nearer, and I heard it continually spoken as an occurrence which no accident could possibly prevent. Elizabeth seemed happy, and my tranquil demeanor contributed greatly to calm her mind. But on the day that was to fulfill my desires, my destiny, she was melancholy. My presentiment of evil pervaded her, and perhaps she also thought that the dreadful secrets which I had promised to reveal to her the following day. My father was, in the meantime, overjoyed, in the bustle of preparation, only observing the melancholy of his niece and the diffidence of a bride. After a ceremony was performed, a large party assembled at my father's, where it was agreed that Elizabeth and I should pass the afternoon and night at Evian, and return to Coligny the next morning. As the day was fair and the wind favorable, we resolved to go by water. There were the last moments of my life during which I enjoyed the feelings of happiness. Those were already read that part. We passed rapidly along. The sun was hot, but we were sheltered by its rays by a kind canopy, while we enjoyed the beauty of the scene. Sometimes on the side of the lake we saw Mont Salve, the pleasant banks of, I'm gonna butcher them, sorry, Montalegre, in the distance surmounting all the beautiful Mont Blanc. in the assemblage of snowy mountains in the vast endeavors to emulate her, sometimes coasting the opposite banks. We saw the mighty Jura oppose its dark side in the ambition that would quit its native country. Wait, I just skipped that. Wait. No, I didn't. No, I didn't skip that. For some reason, I thought I skipped a whole line. I did not. Okay. An almost insurmountable barrier in the invader who should wish to enslave it. Water break real quick. I have no idea how Arthur is still reading. It's been 3 hours. That's crazy. Okay, one more. I took the hand of Elizabeth. You are sorrowful, my love. Ah, if you knew what I had suffered and what I may yet endure, you would endeavor to let me taste the quiet and the freedom from despair, and this one day at least permits me to enjoy. Be happy, my dear Victor, and replied Elizabeth. There is, I hope, nothing to distress you. To be assured that its lively joy is not painted on my face. My heart is contented. Something whispers to me not to depend too much on the prospect that opened before us. But I will not listen to such a sinister voice. Observe how fast we move along, and how clouds which sometimes obscure and sometimes rise above the dome of Mont Blanc, and render these scenes of beauty still more interesting. Look also at the innumerable fish that are swimming in the clear waters, where we can distinguish every pebble of lies in the bottom. What a divine day! How happy and serene nature appears! Thus Elizabeth endeavored to divert her thoughts and mind from all reflection upon the melancholy subjects, but her temper was fluctuating. Joy for a few instincts shone in her eyes, but it continually gave place in the distraction of reverie. The sun sank lower in the heavens. We passed the river Strance, and observed its path through the chasms of the higher, and in the glens of the lower hills. The Alps here come closer in the lake as we approach the amphitheater of mountains which forms its eastern boundaries. The spires of Evian shone through the woods that surrounded it, the range of mountains above mountains on which it was overhung. The winds in which had hitherto carried us along in the amazing rapidity sunk at sunset to the light breeze. The soft air just ruffled the waters and caused a pleasant motion along the trees as we approached the shore, from which it wafted the most delightful scent of flowers and hay. The sun sank beneath the horizon as we landed, and as I touched the shore, I felt those cares and fears revive, which soon were to collapse me and cling to me forever. Okay, last chapter of the night, just chapter 6. We've read 3 chapters. It's very, very good for one of my streams. Like my voice is just hating me. How long is this chapter? That is a short chapter. Okay. If my voice is still okay somehow by the end of this chapter, we'll do one more. But I don't think we will. But we might. Because I want to get this book done in the next stream. It's about 50 pages. And like today, for example, we read... we started at chapter 2. No, actually, we read 4 chapters today. Okay, so we start on page 153, and we're at 190. So, I feel like it is possible that we can read 50 pages tomorrow. Okay. Chapter 6. It was 8 o'clock when we landed, We talked for a short time on the shore, enjoying the transitory light. Sorry about that. It was 8 o'clock when we landed, and we walked for a short time on the shore, enjoying the transitory light, which we retired at the inn, and contemplated the lovely scene of waters, woods, and mountains, obscured in darkness, and yet still displayed on their black outlines. The wind which had fallen in the south now rose with great violence in the west. The moon had reached her summits in the heavens and was beginning to descend. The clouds swept across it swifter than the flight of the Venture, dimmed in her rays, while the lake reflected the scene in the busy heavens, rendered still busier with the restless waves that were beginning to rise. Suddenly a heavy storm of rain descended. I had been calm during the day, but as soon as the nights obscured the shapes of objects, 1,000 fears arose from my mind. I was anxious and watchful, while my right hand grasped a pistol, which was hidden in my bosom. My bosom. I don't even know how to pronounce that, so I'm just gonna changing it every time I say that. I think it's pronounced bosom. Every sound terrified me, but I resolved that I would sell my life dearly, and not relax the impending conflict into my own life, or that of my adversary, were extinguished. As Elizabeth observed my agitation for some time in timid and fearful silence, at length she said, What is that agitates you, my dear Victor? What is that you fear? Oh, peace, peace, my love, replied I. This night all will be safe, but this night is dreadful, very dreadful. I passed an hour in this state of mind, when suddenly I reflected how dreadful the combats which I momentarily expected would be with my wife, and I earnestly entreated her to retire, resolving not to join her until I had obtained some knowledge of the situation of my enemy. She left me, and I continued some time walking up and down the passage of the house, inspecting every corner that might afford a retreat to my adversary. But I discovered no trace of him, and beginning my conjecture of some fortunate chance that intervened to support my execution of his menace, when suddenly I heard a shrill and dreadful scream. It came from the room in which Elizabeth had retired. I knew, as soon as he said, go to sleep, I knew as soon as he left her out of her sight, I knew something was going to happen. As I heard it, the whole truth rushed into my mind. My arms dropped. The motion of every muscle and every fiber was suspended. I could feel the blood trickling in my veins, entangling the extremities of my limbs. This state lasted for but an instant. The screams had repeated and rushed into the room, and I rushed into the room. Great God, why did I not then expire? Why am I here to relate the destruction of my best hope, and the purest creature of earth? She was there, lifeless and inanimate, thrown across the bed, her head hanging down, her pale and distorted features half covered by her hair. Everywhere I turn, I see the same figure, her bloodless arms and relaxed form flung by the murderer. Wait. Everywhere I turn, I see the same figure, her bloodless arms and relaxed form flung by the murderers on her and her bridal bier. Could I behold this and live? Alas, life is obstinate, and clings closest when it's most hated. For a moment only did I lose recollection. I fainted. When I recovered, I found myself surrounded by the people of the inn. Their countenance expressed a breathless terror, but the horror of people appeared only as mockery, a shadow of the feelings that oppressed me. As I escaped from them, to the room which I lay at the body of Elizabeth, my love, my wife, so lately living, so dear, so worthy, as she had been moving from the posture in which I had first beheld her, and now, as she lay, her head upon her arms and a handkerchief thrown across her face and neck, I might have supposed her asleep, and I rushed towards her, and embraced her with ardor. But the deathly languor and coldness of the limbs told me, and what I now beheld in my arms had ceased to be the Elizabeth whom I had loved and cherished. The murderous mark on the fiend grasped her from the neck, and breath had ceased to issue from her lips. While I still hung over her with the agony of despair, I happened to look up, and the windows of the room had been darkened, and I felt a kind of panic on seeing the yellow pale lights of the moon illuminates the chamber. The shutters had been thrown back with a sensation of horror, not only to be described, saw the opening figure, the most hideous and abhorred. A grin on the face of the monster, it seemed to jeer. With some fiendish finger, he pointed towards the corpse of my wife. I rushed towards the window and drew a pistol from my bosom shot, but he eluded me and leapt from his station, and running with the swiftness of lightning, plunged into the lake. The report of the pistol brought a crowd into the room. I pointed to the spots where he had disappeared and followed the tracks with boats. Nets were cast, but in vain. After passing several hours, we returned hopeless. Most of my companions believed it to have been a form of conjured by my fancy. After having landed, they proceeded to search the country, parties going in different directions among the woods and vines. I did not accompany them. I was exhausted. A film covered my eyes, and my skin were parched with the heat of fever. In this state I lay in my bed, hardly conscious of what had happened. My eyes wandered round the room as to seek for something that I had lost. At length I remembered that my father would anxiously expect the return of Elizabeth and myself, but I must return alone. This reflection brought tears to my eyes, and I wept for a long time, but my thoughts rainbowed to various subjects reflecting on my misfortunes. In their cause I was bewildered in the clouds of wonder and horror. The death of William, the execution of Justine, the murder of Serval, and lastly of my wife. Even the moment I knew not of what my own remaining friends were saved from the malignity of the fiend. My father even now be writhing under his grasp, and Ernest might be dead at his feet. The idea made me shudder. It recalled me to action. I started up and resolved to return to Geneva with all possible speed. There was no horse to be procured. I must return by the lake. But the wind was unfavorable, and the rain fell in torrents. However, it was harshly morning, and I might reasonably hope to arrive by night. I hired men to row, and took an oar myself, for I had always experienced relief from mental torments and bodily exercise. But the overflowing misery I now felt to the excess of agitation that I had endured rendered me incapable of any exertion. I threw down the oar and leaned my head upon my hands, gave way to every gloomy idea that arose. As if I looked up, I saw the scenes which were familiar to me in my happiest time, in which I had contemplated, but the day before in the company of her, who was now but a shadow and a recollection. Tears streamed from my eyes, and rain had ceased for a moment, and I saw the fish play in the waters as they had done a few hours before. They had then been observed by Elizabeth. Nothing is so painful as the human mind as a great and sudden change. The sun might shine, or the clouds might lower, but nothing could appear to me as done the day before. A fiend had snatched from me every hope of future happiness. No creature has ever been so miserable as I was, so frightful in events as single as the history of man. But why should I dwell upon the incidents that followed this last overwhelming event? Mine had been a tale of horrors. I have reached their acme, and I must now can be tedious to you. Know that one by one my friends were snatched away, and I left desolate. My own strength is exhausted, and I must tell in a few words what remains of my hideous narration. I arrived in Geneva. My father and Ernest yet lived, but my former sunk under the tidings that I bore. I saw him now, excellent and vulnerable man. His eyes wandered in vacancy, but for had lost their charm and their delights. His niece, his more than daughter, whom he doted on with all the affection which a man feels, who in a decline of life, having few affections, clings more earnestly to those that remain. Cursed be the fiend that brought misery to his gray hairs, and doomed him to waste his wretchedness. He could not live under the horrors which had accumulated around him, and apocalypse fit had brought on, In a few days I had died in my arms. What then became of me? I know not. I lost sensations, and chains and darkness were the only object they pressed upon me. Sometimes indeed I dreamed that I wandered in flowery meadows and pleasant vales with the friends of my youth, and awoke and found myself in a dungeon. Melancholy followed, but by degrees I gained a clear conception of my miseries and situation. I was then released from prison, for they had called me mad, and during my many months, as I understood, a solitary cell had been my habitation. But liberty had been a useful gift to me, a useless gift to me, had I not, as I awakened to reason, and at the same time awakened to revenge. As a memory of past misfortunes pressed upon me, I began to reflect on the cause. The monster whom I had created, the miserable daemon who I had sent abroad into the world, and my destruction I had possessed by maddening rage, when I thought of him and desired and ardently prayed I might have him within my grasp to wreak a great and signal revenge on his cursed head. Nor did my hates long confine myself to useful wishes. I began to reflect on the best means of securing him, and for that purpose, about a month after my release, I repaired to a criminal judge in the town, and told him that I had an accusation to make, that I knew him astray in my family, that I required him to exert his whole authority in the apprehension of the murderer. The magistrate listened to me with attention and kindness. Be assured, sure, said he, no pains or exertion on my part shall be spread to discover the villain. I thank you, replied I. Listen, therefore, to my disposition that I have to make. It is indeed a tale so strange that I should fear you would not credit it, were there not something in truth which, however wonderful, enforces conviction. The story is too connected to my of my dream. I have no motive for falsehood. My manner as I thus addressed him was so impressed but calm I had formed my own heart and resolution to persuade my destroyer of death. And this purpose quieted my agony, and provisions reconciled me to life. I now related my history briefly, but my firmness and precision, making the date with accuracy, and never deviating from invention or exclamation. How many more pages do we have? Oh. One. The magistrate appeared at first perfectly incredulous, but as I continued he became more attentive and interested. I saw him sometimes shudder with horror, or others a lively surprise. Unmingled with disbelief was painted on his countenance. When I concluded my narration, I said, "This is the being whom I accuse, and of whom detection and punishment I call upon you to exert your whole power. It is your duty as a magistrate, and believe that I hope your feelings as a man was not revolt as the execution of those functions on the occasion." This address caused a considerable change in the physiognomy of my auditor. He had heard my story with a half kind of belief in the given of a tale of spirits and supernatural events. But when he was called upon to act officially in consequence, the whole tide of his incredulity returned. He, however, answered mildly, I would willingly afford you every aid in your pursuits, but this creature of whom you speak appears to have powers in which you put all your exertions to defiance. Who can follow an animal which can traverse a sea of ice and inhabit caves and dens, where no man would venture to intrude? Besides, some months have elapsed since the commission of your crimes. No one can conjure what the place he had wandered, or what region he may now inhabit. I do not doubt that he hovers near the spots which I inhabit. If he indeed takes refuge in the Alps, he may be haunted like a chemois, and destroyed as a beast of prey. But I perceive your thoughts. You do not credit my narrative, and do not intend to pursue my enemy, which the punishment of which is his desert. As I spoke, rage sparkled in my eyes. The magistrate was intimidated. You are mistaken. He said, I will exert myself, and if it is in my power to seize the monster, he is sure that he shall suffer punishments proportionate to his crimes. But I fear from which you have yourself described to be his properties, that this will improve impractically, and that every other proper measure is pursued, you shall endeavor to make up your mind to disappointments. That cannot be, but all that I can say is that your little avail, my revenge is of no moment to you, yet while I allow it to be a vice, I confess it that the devouring is only passion of my soul. My rage is unspeakable, and I reflect that the murderer whom I had turned loose upon society still exists. You refuse my just demand, but I have one resource, and I devote myself, either to my life or death, to my destruction. I tremble at the excess of agitation as I said this. There's a frenzy in my manner, and something I doubt not that the haughty fierceness which the martyrs of old are said to have possessed. But to Genevan magistrates, whose mind was occupied by far other ideas than those devoted to heroism, this elevation of mine was much more appearance of madness, and endeavored to soothe me as a nurse does a child, and I reverted to my tales and effects of delirium. Man, I cried, how ignorant art thou in thy pride of wisdom? Cease, you know not what this is to you say. I broke from the house angry and disturbed, and tired to meditate on other modes of action. Okay, my voice is not doing good right now, so unfortunately we're gonna end there. But we read about 40 pages today, and I believe we would be able to finish it tomorrow. I don't see any reason we won't be able to. Like, yeah, wait. Oh yeah, okay, wait. Yeah, the last couple pages are not even part of it's like letters too. Like, it's just like things that Mary Shelley wrote that aren't part of the book. So the actual last page is how to read Frankenstein. Yeah, you only have like 30 pages left, actually. Ish. So yeah, we can definitely finish that tomorrow. I didn't realize this whole thing is just extra stuff. I didn't even realize that. Yeah, we'll easily do that tomorrow. And we can also, as a little extra thing at the end of tomorrow, we can also, well, actually, tomorrow before the stream, I will make a little, like, so our next book after that will actually be a novella from over there. And I'll have, like, a little spinning wheel, and then we can, like, do a little randomizer thing to pick whatever book it is. We'll also do that at the end of the stream tomorrow. Also, which that sounds very, very fun. And we are going to read, there's no way, is Arthur still reading? Let me see if he's still reading. Because he's been almost 4 hours. Is he, like, anywhere near done?
I only said, I think, I think I shall come. Do not count on anything yet.
Okay, we're gonna read Arthur. Following. There's Arthur.
Will you give him a drink of water for Christ's sake?
Yep. Okay. Be nice, be kind. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.